Welcome to House of Horns. My name is Victor Corona, aka Victor Producer, and joining me is a good friend of mine, a colleague, is Gilbert Manzano, who does it for Sports Illustrated. He's a staff writer there. But Gilbert, we have a great show for the people today here on House of Horns. Before I just wanted to. Usually, I ask you a question like we always do, but we have a special guest, so I'll give you the floor now because I want you to do a proper introduction for our special guest.
Yeah, I don't know why people keep calling me a good friend, a close friend. Maybe I am a good person. I don't know, but maybe that's the theme of the show here on House of Horns to talk Rams, to talk about Rams defense, talk about Chris Shula, talk about the absence, unfortunately, of Aaron Donald, talk about all the young pieces, Jerry Verse and Braden Fisk. So it's a lot to talk about. I keep saying talk about. I hate to say talk about. A lot to discuss about the LA Rams. We're going into a different, I guess, stage or era you could say without Aaron Donald. So I had to get an expert on, a good friend. I guess you could call him somewhat of a former colleague because we were beat reporters covering the Chargers, but definitely a good friend, a close friend. And he is the expert. He is the wise man from Fox Sports, covering everything AFC West, everything NFC West. He does it all, but he has a close eye on the LA Rams. And people have been asking about this here on House of Horns. What's going to happen with Chris Shula? What happened with Raheem Morris leaving? What happened with Aaron Donald leaving? What can you tell us about the defense here for the LA Rams with Chris Shula? So we got the expert, Eric Williams, jumping on the show. Eric, how'd you like that intro, by the way?
Man, intro was fire, dude. Like I need to like record that so I can use it later on. I appreciate you, and you're right. We shared some beers in different countries, so we're definitely close.
Yeah. Yeah, Mexico. When
Yeah,
Philip Rivers threw four interceptions against the Chiefs, right? Monday Night
yeah.
Football.
I guess you kind of had to bring that up, huh?
Hey, but hey, it's not what's up, Bull to Fernando and Danny Ramirez. It's
Yeah.
talking House of Horns, so people don't care here. But uh, Eric, it is interesting because I like to say colleague, but I forget that we're somewhat competitors at the time. But beat reporters feel like colleagues, right? We're together all the time on the road, traveling. We had a good time at Mexico City, Estadio Azteca. I forget.
Hmm.
We were probably together 2018, 2019, maybe. No, not Kobe year, right? Uh,
No, 2018 and 19, I believe.
and 2018 was a fun year. And there goes Fernando. Get in the comments going. He is mine and Daniel's friend, not yours. Actually, Eric, I didn't tell Fernando about this. I feel like I kind of went
Yeah.
behind his back. How do you feel about this somewhat podcast cheating here?
I'm okay with it, but it's a little scary being stalked by Fernando, but that's all good.
Yeah, Fernando has the notifications on. He's on top of it, but he does everything for Combos on the Beat. So I do appreciate that. But Eric, to get this interview started, I'll ask two questions here, and then we'll have Victor jump in to ask you more. But we saw your story that you wrote for Fox Sports on Chris Shula, and honestly, it was a good read because a lot of people have been asking, like, what to expect, and we keep saying like maybe similar. Like he was around for Brandon Staley and Raheem Moore. He's been around for 7 years, so we
Hmm.
expect similarities and at least the principles and the foundation. I saw you mention the 3-4 defense and base, but I guess from your overall, impressions of talking with Chris Shula, what are you expecting from the Rams defense in 2024?
Yeah, I don't expect it to look a lot different than what it's looked like in the past, to be honest. Be honest, because like you said, he coached under Raheem, he coached under Brandon Staley, he also coached under Wade Phillips, and all those guys ran a 3-4 scheme or variations of it. So I think we're still going to see a lot of similarities. However, because you don't have Aaron Donald there, I think that's kind of the key piece is like, well, what is he going to do different in order to generate pass rush? Because Aaron Donald was such a beast inside and you kind of play off of him. When I talked to Chris about that, he noted that they knew how teams were going to block them because of having to deal with Aaron and they could kind of play off of that. Now you don't have that, massive productive guy inside. You're going to have to figure out different ways to get after the passer. They drafted Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, as you mentioned. Those were their top two picks. They bring back Kobe Turner, who had 9 sacks last year, and Brian Young, who had 8 sacks last year. So they have some pieces. It's just kind of figuring out how they're going to put them together. I know when Wade Phillips was here, the first 3 years coaching that defense, they were amongst the top 10 in terms of blitz. Last year, I think they were like right in the middle. So I think they're probably going to blitz a little bit more, which makes a little bit of sense when you have a linebacker like Ernest Jones, who's good as a blitzer. So that might be one of the key pieces, that they want to do to kind of ignite that pass rush. Last thing I'll talk about is just the type of the way that he wants the defense to look. Chris Shula kind of mentioned that, his grandfather, Shula, who's coaching the NFL Hall of Famer, obviously talked about keeping things simple, that it's about shedding blocks, pursuit to the football, and having guys not have a lot in their head so they can play fast. So I expect to have kind of a simple approach with the illusion of complexity to make offenses think in terms of what they're doing schematically.
That's interesting, Eric, because a lot of Rams fans have been shouting for the last couple of years, at least the Raheem Morris era, to blitz more, get after the quarterback a little more. And maybe I'm just kind of going off of. I had another question, but I'm going to segue here a little bit. And maybe I can ask you a little later, the one I had planned. But I felt like with the Aaron Donald era, like you had a guy who could give you enough, push, and you could do it because you need a lot of help in the back end, especially the last couple of years with such a young defensive back group. You lost Jalen Ramsey last year, and maybe if you blitz, you might get burned and you'll get in trouble. But to go off of that, like, is that something like that you got a good sense, or did he mention it a lot, or the blitzing or and having more pressure? They do have more guys now, like you mentioned, Jared Verse, you got Fisk and Kobe Turner, and you got Byron Young. Michael Hoyt can now be coming off as a rotational pass rusher, third down situations. But do you get that sense that, or more like, what? Let's wait and see. But do you feel confident about the blitzing being up more in 2024?
I think you have to wait and see. I think everybody wants to blitz, but you got to be able to hold up in the back end. So if you can't hold up in the back end defensively, you can't send guys if you're not really sure that you're going to be able to get home. And so I think they're going to experiment during training camp, during these preseason games, to see what it looks like, see if it makes sense. You have two older corners there on the edge, though, when you're talking about Darius Williams coming back and Trey, if he's going to be healthy enough. And then same thing with the safety situation, not a whole lot of experience. So that would lead me to believe that maybe they're going to focus more on trying to get there with their front four. And maybe there's going to be a lot of pressure on Kobe Turner, even though they're trying not to put him in that role. They're already saying he's moving this 3-tech. So, I mean, whether or not you want to, kind of embrace that, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to kind of be able to generate pass rush on his own. One last thing I'll say about that, I did talk to Wade Phillips for this story, and my sense was that, from watching from just kind of a reporter's perspective, is Aaron Donald would draw double teams, and that would free up guys to get singles to be able to be successful. We saw that with Leonard Floyd. He had one of his best seasons as a pro, because he was getting singled up on the edge. But when I talked to Coach Phillips, he was like, no, we're trying to get Aaron singled up so he can win. So schematically, they're trying to do whatever they can, whether it's move Aaron to a tackle to get him to one-on-ones, or trying to free him up with schemes so that he can win, because they know he has the best chance of winning. And I had never really thought about it like that. So if that's the case, I wonder if going into this year, they're going to be trying to do things to get Kobe Turner singled up so he can win, because he's probably their best pass rusher coming back.
Eric, I had a question for you as well, but listening to you talk about Wade Phillips, he, in the story you mentioned that Chris took a lot of some things from the different coaches, whether it was Brandon Staley, whether it was Wade Phillips, and then of course Raheem Morris.
Mm-hmm.
For yourself, like just talking to him, how do you think all those philosophies can come together in what he wants to implement for this defense?
Well, I think the first thing you have to start with is relationships. And I think Coach Raw was so good at getting guys motivated and kind of building that trust on a day in, day out basis with the way that he was on the field. And then when you talk to guys in terms of his relationships in those meeting rooms. So I think in talking to, sources about Chris, that's one of his strengths, is he's a good relationship builder. Ernest mentioned that, that he felt that Chris kind of got the most out of him as a position coach. So I think he kind of brings that with him as a guy that's moving from position coach to now defensive coordinator, where you're standing in front of everybody and addressing all the guys from all the different position groups, as the defense coordinator. I think it helps in terms of chemistry and kind of keeping things similar, that he's been there for 7 years and knows exactly what Sean McVay wants. He's also, one of Sean McVay's homeboys. He played with him at college. So those guys probably think similarly in terms of their approach to football and big picture, what they want. But then I also think you kind of have to add those other experiences, obviously with Coach Phillips, because that's who he was with initially when he was with when he came over from the Chargers to the Rams. He actually coached with a year with John Bacano, who's also a disciple of Wade Phillips' defense. So he had that first year with Pagano and then came over to the Rams in 2017 once McVay got the job. So I think you can't leave that out either, just in terms of, being with Coach Phillips and everything you learned from him. And then, I think the key piece with Staley is that Vic Fangio defense and kind of keeping a top on the defense, keeping the lid on the defense, the quarters coverage or the cover two in terms of having two safeties back. So it's kind of a mixture of all that. You don't want to give up explosives. So I think you kind of think about that in terms of the secondary coverage. But then I also think one last thing I'll add to that is the connectivity from your defensive line to the linebackers to the secondary. He's coached at all three levels. And so he understands how all those things are intertwined together, which I think is important. I think if you remember the conversation with the Niners last year with their defensive coordinator, is they didn't feel like there was a connectivity between their secondary and their defensive line. That's one of the reasons Shanahan moved on, is because really the front seven wasn't happy with what was happening within that defense and felt like there was a disconnect. And that's why they didn't play well as all 11. I think with the Rams, you can feel comfortable that there's going to be connectivity with all three levels of those defense, because Shula's been there for 7 years and he's coached all three levels. And I think that will help them kind of, learn that defense fast in terms of what he wants to do.
Yeah, and that kind of gets me to my next question in terms of, we know they lost Coach Henney on the defensive line, and as you talked about, but how important was it for them to keep Aubrey Pleasant? We've heard now in the past week that he was now named, was he a coach as well? So how did that help for Shula to be able to keep Aubrey Pleasant?
I think it was huge. Aubrey obviously was a guy that interviewed for the job, didn't get it. The fact that you're able to still keep him on the roster, and then you give him, like you said, that added title of associate head coach or assistant head coach, which I'm assuming means more money because you got another title. Those guys work well together and they know each other. And that's one of the things Sean McVay talked about, was the experience in terms of the position coaches on that defense. You mentioned Aubrey Pleasant, who's been with that McVay for a long period of time. They bring over Giff Smith, who actually was the mentor for Coach Henney. Coach Eric Henderson coached with him with the Chargers. So you could expect, I would think, a similar approach with Coach Smith, who was an interim head coach for the Chargers. He's been around a long period of time. Greg Williams, who actually was a secondary coach with the Chargers, and Shula knew him there. You now bring him in to coach linebackers, so there's continuity there in terms of those guys know each other, and Coach Williams has been in the league a long time. And then Chris Beek is another guy that's been coaching for a long time as well. He was actually coaching defensive line with the Seahawks when I covered that team a decade ago. So he's been in the league a long time as well. So just a lot of experience on the defensive side of the football, which I think, again, will help in terms of getting young players up to speed quickly so you can get the most out of them.
Gilbert.
Okay. Eric, I was wondering because, again, like me and Victor had a bunch of questions that are written out, and then like we talked to you. It's like, okay, let's go this way and go this way because you're giving us so much information. But I don't know if it's a good question or not. But just hearing you talk about all these different schemes and backgrounds that he's come from, like we mentioned Wade and Brandon and Raheem, and the NFL, like obviously it's a copycat league, and right now the trend is, before it was Fangio, right? Now the trend is Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter. You want to have that. But like sometimes it's okay to be ahead of the curve, like be ahead, and people don't know what to expect. Like you're not known for this type of scheme or whatever. And do you think you might get some of that sense where like he's trying new things a lot? You brought that up with the blitzing and the whole personnel stuff, being new players, but those different backgrounds, is that something you think maybe could be a benefit after the season?
I think the key thing is versatility. It's being able to change week to week based on who you're playing. So if you have all these different tools in your tool bag and you can bring them out and be effective running those things, I think it makes you hard as a defense to prepare for. I think that's one of the strengths for McDonald is he can give you a lot of variations, a lot of different types of looks, but then they can still get to what they want to get to out of those different pre-snap looks, which makes them dangerous. And so, yeah, I definitely think Chris can do something similar because of all of the experience they have together as a group of coaches, and that they're all on the same page. It's not like they're coming in and they're throwing a bunch of coaches together that have to kind of learn each other first and learn their strengths and weaknesses, and then they could kind of go after that. These guys already know each other. They know this defense inside and out, and I think that will help as they coach these young guys get up to speed quickly in terms of their approach, how they want to coach, how they want them to play down in and down out. And then on a week-to-week basis, being able to make adjustments. And, guys are going to get hurt. So it's going to be important that you have depth at those positions that can come in and play close to the potential as a starter.
A big part of your story, Eric, was his grandfather, Don Shula. And, obviously when you have a name like that in your family, you being the grandson of the all-time winningest head coach of the NFL, you would think it will be a quicker rise in the coaching ranks to be a coordinator. And like he took his time. And did that come about like this kind of long road for somebody who has a popular last name like that, an iconic last name in the NFL? And is there some added pressure to being Don Shula's grandson, you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's 38, so that's pretty young to be.
I forget.
Yeah, he just started really quick, and he started right out of college,
Yeah.
and start, working his way through. I know he talked about the importance of him being a defensive coordinator at that D3 school at John Carroll, which, there's been a number of guys that have come from that school and gone on to coach in the NFL. Josh McDaniels, Brandon Staley, who he actually replaced as the defensive coordinator. Tom Telesco, who we know played at John Carroll. There's been a lot of names that have gone through that small Division III school, which is, kind of odd. The stadium named after Don Shula because that's where he played. But I think for him, just being able to be in control of a defense, call plays, and be in charge of position groups and kind of setting the tone, even though it's at a much smaller level, at least gave him a taste of what he's going to deal with, now a decade later. I think it's kind of par for the course in terms of his rise as a position coach to where he's at now. He put his time in, and you have to, give him credit for that. He started as a quality control coach with the Chargers, then, kind of worked his way up as a position coach at a couple different position groups before, taking over now. McVay feels like he's ready for the job. In terms of his grandfather, I think he just sees it as an honor, to have that Shula last name and kind of wants to live up to that legacy, but I don't think he sees it as any added pressure. I would say the last thing is this guy's been, preparing to be a football coach, even though he probably didn't realize it since he's 3-4 years old, being around his grandfather who has so much knowledge and asking him questions and having that access from such a young age. And I mean, it's probably just been his expectation, to do something like this. And he probably has just a lot of knowledge that he maybe doesn't even realize that he has because of those conversations he's had with his grandfather over the years.
We'll ask a couple more, Eric, and we'll get you out of here, but really appreciate the time. But Victor,
Sure.
Anything else you want to ask before I kind of give him a little more rapid fire kind of questions?
Yeah, and I'll just say this in terms, we've seen with coordinators that it takes them a couple years to implement their defense.
Mm-hmm.
What is a reasonable expectation for Chris Shula this season for the Rams? Because we know what to expect from the offense, but we have no idea. Like, as you said, I mean, you made some great points in terms of, it's been good to see that, going back to one of the things that you pointed out was the team that I thought about was the Panthers last year, where it was a bunch of completely, different coaches. Here you have a lot of connectivity with, between the defensive backs coaches and then your linebackers coach and now your defensive coordinator. So what is a reasonable expectation for Chris Shula and that defense?
I think a reasonable expectation is to have a top 15 defense with this group, if I'm being honest. And the reason I say that is because I still look at that secondary and I still feel like they have some holes that they have to replenish there. So if the secondary plays better than expected, then I think the defense will be better. I think the front seven is going to be pretty good, even with Aaron Donald not being there. If Kobe Turner comes back and plays like he did last year, along with Bryant Young, and then you get what you expect from those top two rookies in Verse and Braden Fisk. One thing I'll say about those two rookies is, when I covered the 49ers, they had Justin Smith and Alden Smith. And Fisk reminds me a little bit of Alden Smith with the way he plays inside. And those two guys really played well off of each other. So if you can get similar type of play in terms of the connectivity of those two guys coming from Florida State and being on the same team now, in terms of being able to run games and kind of play off each other, which you've seen some of, if you've watched some of their YouTube highlights, they could be pretty dangerous up front. So I think this team is going to be led from their defensive line play. If they're as good as I expect they're going to be up front, that's going to help their back end. I think top 15 is a reasonable expectation because of, like you said, new defensive coordinator, no Aaron Donald. I think this is going to be a team that's going to be led by their offense, Sean McVay. And then the defense is going to get better as the season goes on. But I think they'll be in top 10 in sacks. I think they were in the bottom third in sacks last year. I think they had 41. They were kind of in the middle in terms of their pressure rate. I think they're going to be, which is kind of weird to say that because Aaron's not here, but I do feel like they're going to be able to create more consistent pressure because of the pieces they had in the draft.
Eric, you've been very efficient with your answers because I wanted to ask you earlier. I remember now about Kobe Turner, and you nailed it, saying hey, they're going to make one-on-one matches with him, move him all over the line. So we appreciate that response. And then right here with your answer, you're a little sounds like you're a little concerned about the secondary. You like the defensive front, but how about to end here, just to give us your overall view of the Rams. They surprised many teams last year to win 10 games. Have that close game against the Detroit Lions, but when you make the playoffs and you win that many games, there's high expectations to do it again. Obviously, they lost, Aaron Donald, but like you mentioned, they added some pieces to the front with Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. And last year, Puka Nacua, the rookie sensation. You got, unfortunately, Kyrie Williams is dealing with injuries again, but he had a nice season last year. Stafford had a nice bounce back year from 2022 with all the injuries. Do you see them going back to the postseason? Do you see them pushing the San Francisco 49ers? What's kind of your overall view for this team after the offseason?
Yeah, I do see them going back to the postseason again. I was a little higher on the Rams last year than maybe some other folks nationally, just because I have so much respect for Sean McVay as a head coach, and I just didn't see him having a team under 500 again because of his approach. And I know he was pretty salty with the way that the season went this year before at 5-12, and I think that was kind of eating at him. So I thought they would win 7 or 8 games going into it. So they exceeded my expectations in terms of getting 10 wins, getting into the postseason. And I think Sean's ready to just continue to hit the gas. So I predicted them to go 10-7 again, just because I think the schedule is tough and because of the changes on defense. I think they might have some hiccups early. It'll be hard for them to press the Niners because the Niners roster is so talented, in my opinion, and they bring everybody back. But the games that they played against the Niners were close. They were right there. So I expect them to be competitive. I wouldn't be surprised if they win 11 or 12 games, but I feel like 10 wins to me is the floor for this team. And I expect them to not only get in the postseason, but to potentially make a deep postseason run if things, go well for them.
Well, Eric, as you know, our good friend Dan Dago likes to call me a curse. So that one year that Sean McVay had a losing season, I got to cover the team. So when I left the beat to go to work for SI, I should have known that the Rams are going to be better because I think I picked them 7-10 last year. So that's my bad, Rams fans.
I was the Grim Reaper in Seattle. The first 2 years I covered the Seahawks, they went 4-12 and 5-11. And everybody blamed me because it was the first 2 years I covered the team. So I understand your situation, Gil.
Okay. And then they won Super Bowl, right? Not too long after that.
When I left.
Okay. Yeah, that's tough, Eric. But Eric, last thing, anything you want to promote? You're doing a great job for Fox Sports, and again, you're covering the AFC West and the NFC West. You got a lot on your plate, but anything we should be looking out for?
Doing a story on Ricky Pearsall, their first round pick for San Francisco, and just kind of the transition he's making from college to pros, and this kind of getting more of an opportunity because Brandon Ayuk is not in OTAs right now because he's in contract talk. So I'll have that up coming up in a day or two, and then also doing something on Trey Benson, the running back for the Cardinals, and they, kind of adding to the running back room, a guy that could be a home run hitter for them in terms of the running game.
See, I like Trey Benson. That's why I'm high on the Cardinals. People think I'm a little local here on House of Horns and Comas on the Beat because I have them winning 9 games. Maybe that's a little too high, but I like what they're doing offensively.
I got them at 8-9. I mean, I think they're going to double their win total.
There you go.
Pretty good.
Yeah, the defense is a problem, but they added a little more pieces to that unit. Mm-hmm. So this is why we could talk Eric to Eric for days because he covers all these teams here. But Eric, I told you 20 minutes. It's 25. I'm sorry about that, but I'm sure you had more fun here than What's Up Boat. So I think we're good.
I enjoyed either way, and I'll enjoy the beer that you buy me when we see you later.
Hey, there you go for sure. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, Eric.
Right, have a good one, guys.
Have a good.
Man, that was awesome.
Yep, it was. That was some great stuff from Eric there. Let me just fix one more item there.
Yeah. I like when interviews don't go as planned. That sounds a little bad, but like it's sometimes boring when you're like, okay, let me ask my next question. Eric is like, sometimes answering the question, giving you answer to the next question. It's like, okay, gotta be on my toes, and then going off of what he's saying and the whole thing about the blitzes. Maybe some concerns with the secondary, liking them to go 10-7, go back to the postseason, the whole story with Chris Shula and the connections there. So I thought it was a great interview, Vic.
I did too. I mean, there was a lot there where he gave us a bunch of stuff that, once you started, you got him going, he gave us a lot of things that I kind of I wanted to ask him. And so once he went into, I kind of had to pivot, and he still gave us a bunch of stuff that I was really, I really took away. I think the biggest takeaway for me, Gilbert, is the fact that, I didn't think about this. And what he brought up is the fact that they're all connected. Like the even though they lost Coach Henderson, the defensive line, and you talked about this, you've brought this up. I thought it was important to keep all those guys, the rest of that coaching staff. And as you saw, Raheem Morris even poached some of those guys from the Rams, but he did so on the offensive side. So I thought bringing in his what was it? Who's the new defensive line coach again?
Oh, Give Smith.
Bringing him, I thought it was a big get for them, and I that was my biggest takeaway, Gilbert. I don't know about you.
Yeah, getting to know Giff with the Chargers. Everybody loved the guy. Joey Bosa loved him. And then I honestly forgot that Shula was with the Chargers until I read Eric's story. So obviously Giff and Shula know each other and a bunch of connections there. And like I was telling Eric, like, hearing all the types of ideas that he wants to kind of maybe experiment with, it could be good and bad. Good as in like you're going to be ahead of the curve. You're going to try new things. You're going to be people don't know what to expect from you. You're not a copycat scheme. But like you mentioned the Panthers. Like when you do a little too much, you get in trouble. But they were doing too much with coaches who weren't connected. And it seems like they're connected right here. So that's the positive of trying to try a lot of new things. And then hearing Eric talk about Kobe Turner and how Eric said it himself that he feels like Kobe Turner's their best pass rusher. And he's an interior guy. So that kind of makes me think like, maybe the scheme might look very similar to the way they use Aaron Donald because it's all built on feeding Aaron Donald. So if Kobe Turner is your best guy on the defensive front, then you're going to feed the guy. But that requires moving him all over the front. Maybe something like Aaron Donald sometimes play on the edge. And like you mentioned, I think it sounds like going to play the 3 tech there. So it's going to be a big season for Kobe Turner. And I honestly thought I was like, well, they won't put too much on the guy because they got Braden Fisk and they also spent a capital on Jared Verse. But like, he might be the focal guy, and it was actually different for me to hear that because I thought it's gonna be kind of a collective group, but it could be kind of Kobe being the star and the other guys kind of helping at the same time.
And I'm sure Ram fans' ears perked up when he said that there might be a little bit more blitzing. I mean, that's what they've been asking for from this defense. So you might see a little bit more blitzing from this defense. And I thought the other thing too was the comparison that he saw between the 249er defensive players from the past to what he's seen from Brandon Fisk and Jared Verse. I thought that was another good thing I hadn't even thought about. I mean, and just reading, a lot of the beat reporters talk about and some of the answers that that have come in from the coaches that have spoken about those two guys. I think the biggest reason that they overpaid for Brandon Fizz was because uh, they like how well they played with each other, how well and so for them it was worth overpaying for that. And so that'll be something to keep an eye on, Gilbert. And we'll get into it as we go further into the show. But in terms of I want to ask you what are some storylines that you'll be looking at from OTAs as we get into it. But just wrapping up the Eric Williams conversation. When I first read his story, I thought number one, I thought it was really impressive of him to be the first one to talk to Chris because I haven't seen anybody else talk to him. So that shout out to Eric for being the first one.
Yeah, and I'm sure Eric is very connected. He's covered the Chargers. I'm guessing he knew Shula from those days, and he's also covered the Rams. And he's been spending time, like I mentioned, covering the AFC West and the NFC West as a whole. But before I give you my last point, Victor, let's drop that engagement question because it does tie in with the Eric Williams interview here. So for the engagement question of the week, don't be shy. We got some comments already from Michael, Willie, and James, and Fernando got it started. But let me know your biggest takeaway from that interview with Eric Williams. Hopefully you caught it. If you're a little late, make sure you do the rewind or watch the replay version of the episode here. But and I know we don't do the best job of promoting some of these interviews. They're kind of last minute, but we you brought up the idea. Hey, get Eric Williams on. He had the Chris Shula feature, and I just remember a lot of people keep asking about Chris Shula, and I kind of feel like we haven't given the best answer because it's more a lot of unknowns and a lot of wait and see. And I'm like, I don't want to talk on something that I don't really know. So we got the expert who talked to him, Eric Williams. Hopefully that helped out. So if you're late, check that out. If you caught it, let us know in the comments your biggest takeaway from the interview with Eric. But the last thing I'll touch on, he sounded a little concerned about the secondary, and
Yeah.
I could definitely see that because they are older cornerbacks, and but the young guys haven't really panned out either. So I get why they kind of bet on some older guys, being the Rams. Like, Kobe Durant didn't have that kind of step forward. Darion Kendrick has been up and down. They decided not to pay Akilo Witherspoon, but they're kind of banking on Tre'Davious White to have a healthy season. And sometimes when you go back to a former player like a Darius Williams that they did last year with John Johnson, it just doesn't really work out. So I could see the concern there. And then Cam Curl being the safety from the Commanders, like Cam Curl was part of a very terrible secondary group, so I do have concerns about him too. So that kind of gives me some pause to think about, I guess, on the negative side. But I'm totally with Eric on the defensive front. I like how much they invested in that, and then thinking ahead last year because the picks the first 4 out of 6 picks this year were defensive front guys. They spent capital last year on defensive front guys because they probably already knew Aaron Donald had a year or two left. So that's going to pay off, but there's issues at linebacker with depth. There could be some issues in secondary. So I love the question that you asked, Victor, about what are some reasonable expectations for this defense. And Eric said, somewhere in the middle, and I could definitely see that too.
Yeah, and part of it is because, look, we talked about after our show last week, and we said, are we being too positive on this Rams team? You talked to people around the league who have told you that they're really high on the Rams. And so my biggest thing is always like, do we just have blinders on here? And that's why I keep asking. I'm like, what is a reasonable expectation for this Rams defense? Because they lose Aaron Donald, we know that. But then how do you fill in? And now we're starting to get some answers, and we'll get even more as we go into training camp with this defense. I still want to see, that secondary in terms of the safeties and how do they mesh. We don't know what they're gonna, as you talked about. That's a great point by you with Tre'Davious, White, and then with Williams as well. We don't know how this is gonna look. I also, and we got a little bit more insight from Eric, and because he was able to talk to Chris, and so we got a little bit more, more information on that. But I think if we have some concerns going into the season, Gilbert, when it comes to the Rams, I think it's that secondary, and Eric pointed it out perfectly.
I'll say this, and I'm not just trying to pat myself in the back, but we should be a little weary of predictions that just pick all the good teams from last year. Like Victor,
Yeah.
you're a big person that speaks about this. Like you talk about, well, every year is different. That's
Yes.
why the salary cap, the schedule is all designed for quick turnaround and different teams and
Mhm.
not have it repetitive. Obviously, the Chiefs keep winning, but they're kind of an exception. And
Yes.
when Eric agreed with me about the Cardinals winning 8 or 9 games, I'm like, cool. Like you're expecting some surprises too because you're looking a little deeper. And when he said the Rams could go 10-7, I'm like, cool. Like it's not just Eric and people thinking, well, because they won last, they're gonna go back. Like he's looking a little bit of everything. He's talking to Ricky Pearsall from the 49ers because he's trying to get to know the new 49er players. So Eric does his homework about changes and newcomers and coaching staffs and honestly, like I can't keep up with Eric when it comes to football scheme. I know he knows how to break it down. He played football, so whenever I get around Eric, I pick his brain about scheme. I kind of just ask a little general question, and then he breaks it down. But he knows his stuff, and
Yeah.
when Eric says that, he's not gonna give you like the homer take. Well, like he doesn't know. I think he lives in San Diego. That's not too far from LA, but he covers the team pretty well, but he knows how to look under every rock. And when he gave us insight on the 49ers very quickly, Cardinals and the Rams at the end, I'm like, definitely he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, and I would love to have him back on if he's available to kind of do a roundup on the NFC West because I mean we have to talk about the rest of the division. I mean we're just talking about the Rams here, but they are going to face these opponents twice this season. Whether it's the Seahawks, which he's covered before, he's gonna as he said he's got a story coming out on Trey Benson and the Cardinals, and then as well as the 49ers. So he's a good guy to make sure go and check out that article as we talked about. It's called "The Rams Can't Replace Aaron Donald, but Chris Shula, grandson of Don, has a plan." So and it's on FoxSports.com. Make sure you go and check it out. And we appreciate his time, Gilbert. But I was gonna ask you, do you be? I kind of want to switch things up before we get to Rams news and notes, unless you want to give the update on the Rams Puka Nakua jersey. Do you want to get to that
Yeah,
next?
there's I don't know if it's good news, not for is it Rick Drummond 2025.
Yes.
There's good and bad news, and I guess the good news is that I guess this person never claimed the Puka Nakua jersey, so it's still available. It's just the bad news is I haven't done the second
Oh,
I
there
guess
we go.
raffle on GPT. Is it cheap? I can always forget it. Chat BT, whatever. On AI, there you go,
There
artificial
you go.
intelligence. So, uh, and I was hoping I could get it done before the show because I want to have people hear who won. But I gave Ricky Drummond, plenty of time to come and
Yes,
announce himself.
yes.
Uh, so just for the good news, we're gonna eventually have another drawing for the Puka Nakua
There
jersey.
you go, guys.
It's still available, uh, but I haven't done it yet. So hopefully for the next show, I can announce the winner, and hopefully somebody claims it. But I guess the longer this goes, the more time I have to save my money to buy this jersey, because we want to make sure it's a nice jersey,
Yes,
not the fake one on eBay or Timu or Wish or whatever. I'm trying to get you the real deal here. So,
on
uh,
Instagram.
yeah, or yeah, whatever. But we're gonna make sure whoever wins it, we're gonna take care of them. But give me some time to do the proper raffle on the machine here.
All right. Well, let's get to now that we've gotten that out of the way, Gilbert. Let me get to these comments, and then we'll close out with Ram news and notes. That way we don't drag the show. I mean, and I'll cut the Eric Williams um, that part of it, and then I'll repost it so that way people can check it out after this. So let's start off with Willie Bowen here. He says, "Opposing quarterbacks beware. Here comes the LA Rams defense. Horns up." Michael Armenta checks in, says, "What up, compas? What up, Michael? It's good to
So,
hear from you
Michael,
again." He says, "It will be interesting who will be the defensive captains. Do you have any who it might be? Do you
actually,
have any?"
I'll say Ernest Jones.
Yes, that's a
Um,
yeah.
that'll be one. Was he one last year? I lost track of the ones last year. But that's probably like maybe like a nah. He's too young. Kobe Turner. He's one of their best players.
I
Like
would
maybe
say I would say if you ask me, I would say it's gonna be Kobe Turner and Ernest Jones. That would be my guess.
yeah, Kobe Turner. Like when I hear him talk, he's pretty mature. So those would be the two right there. And then I don't know what the second there right now.
Yeah, just because they're coming in, maybe like Tre'Davious White, or maybe Williams coming back. Maybe he's got some juice there, but that's a good question. It'll be interesting to see who is going to be the defensive captains now with Aaron Donald gone. Willie Bowen says Jones, Turner versus Fizz, foursome, fearsome foursome of the era of the LA Rams, horns up. And then James Wheelock says it depends on how the corners play for blitzing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's also too. And you asked him about that as well in terms of whether or not. I mean, and he answered that as well. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. I think that's one of those things where I think next week we'll kind of start talking about storylines that we want to see during training camp. We'll start getting into that, and I think that'll be something that a storyline is going to be the secondary. Michael Armenta says, I hope Shula works out well with the group he has. Um, and then Delver says, Eric Williams, good stuff, compas. Still have my doubts about the linebacker position. We'll have a chance in close games with field goals. And that's another storyline, Gilbert, we'll get into is
Mm-hmm.
the new kicker, the rookie. That'll be something to talk about in the coming weeks. DJ Fono says, a good thing Shula isn't new to the Rams franchise. It could be worse if he was a new coordinator. And then we got Ramsoholic. He says, what's good, Ramily? What's going on, Ramsoholic? I,
Ramsaholic.
I like that. That's a cool name. And then we have one of your good friends here,
Jorge.
Jorge says Gilberto, and then Mike Armenta says, "So you're telling me there's a chance?" And he's talking about the
Yeah.
jersey here.
I want to say, Michael, you actually have a good chance. I saw you have many entries into the Puka Nakua jersey giveaway.
Yeah, it's a DJ who says one of my boys just texted me this week and told me he was going to become a Rams fan, so I'm getting him his first jersey, either a Puka or a Cup. Hey, that's not
Hopefully
a
the
bad
good
one.
kind. Hopefully not from
Yeah.
Wish.
And then last comment here is from Jorge again says Gilbert's predictions have me on point lately. My boy's a prophet. There you
He's a
go.
little sarcastic, Jorge, but you are telling the truth because I did pick Alexander Usyk to beat Tyson Fury. But Jorge, people are mad at me because I chose the Chargers to go 7-10. So hopefully I'm not too accurate for your sake.
And Willie Bowen says, who's going to be the leader in sacks on the LA Rams?
Ugh. It's hard to pick an interior guy, but Kobe Turner is really good. And after hearing Eric say he's our best pass rusher, I'll go with Kobe Turner. And the way they're going to use him too, single
Yeah,
matchups.
I'm with you, especially after what Eric said. I'm with you. DJ Fono says Los Callejones. So
Yeah,
that's a good place to
the
find a
swap
jersey.
meets, man. Downtown
Yeah,
LA.
yeah. Uh, Jorge Rodriguez says Gilbert's been a different man ever since that U6 pick.
Yeah,
There you
I've
go.
been
You're on
feeling
a roll
myself a
there.
little bit. I've been guaranteeing the Cardinals will win 9 games, the Commanders will win 9 games, the Packers will not make the playoffs. I'm feeling it right now.
All right, Gilbert, let's finish strong here. We got Rams news and notes. So the Rams are moving their training camp to LMU. I was going to ask you guys about this, you and Eric, but I felt like it was more important to ask them about, Chris Shula and everything that was going on with the defense just because we needed some answers there. But what's your thoughts on the Rams moving a training camp to LMU?
I was more curious about what the heck happened to Woodland Hills. Like obviously the whole the building that was kind of like still in the early stages for the facility, but it sounded like they're gonna have like a temporary site and have some fields there, and that to me feels like they weren't ready to do that. So they might have given up on Irvine too soon. That's the feel that I got. Obviously, I haven't talked to anybody about this, so I don't want to put too much stock into it. But it kind of felt like because just being around the team that 2022 year, they've been rushing to get to Woodland Hills and get it going. It's just been a lot of hiccup after hiccup after hiccup, and maybe this was the latest snag. We're like, crap, because like, why would you give up Irvine when people love that facility or that training campsite if you weren't ready to go to Woodland Hills? I think something came up, but it's not the worst thing. Honestly, Vic, I can't remember the last time I've been on that campus, LMU. It's a nice campus, so I'm looking forward to see how they do it. It's not the worst thing. You're right in the middle of LA. Maybe that's better for people. I'm actually gonna leave the valley pretty soon, so I'm not too mad about it. It's a quicker drive for me in training camp, but it's not the worst thing. But I just wonder behind the scenes what the heck happened with Woodland Hills. But maybe it's better this way because when you go to Woodland Hills, you want to roll out everything, like the nice facility, everything shiny, brand new. That's what the Chargers are doing on El Segundo. So maybe I'm just kind of I'm making stuff up here, but it just felt like just knowing how many hiccups they've had, maybe that could be it.
Yeah, I just think that and I pass by the Willen Hill site every day. I could have told you that they weren't going to be ready. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've been going through it, and then you see, um, Coach McVay. I think was it during the draft or was it was no during the schedule release. He was talking about that he was still in a little shed there. He's had the same office for 7 years. He said since he's been there. So that's been my other question. Why has it taken so long? I guess we'll have to have someone on to kind of explain what the situation is with that because it's been going on. It's been going on for a while now, and so seeing McVay kind of joke about it, I know he's not happy about that. And then one more point here, Gilbert, that I saw too is that at LMU, players and coaches and staff will return to living in dorms for several weeks after staying at a luxury hotel in Newport Beach and
Ah.
bus to Irvine campus the last several years. So no more cushy Newport Beach
Mm.
luxury hotel. They're going to be living in dorms. Is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing?
I, I don't know. I don't think it's a bad thing or a good thing. I actually don't. I'm not too big on. I know Fernando is, and maybe yourself on like bonding time and all that stuff, and going through the struggle and having these hard beds. Like no, like these are professional football players. You got to give them the best of the best. But I don't think it's a big deal. I'm sure these dorms are okay. It's still a private school, right? I'm sure
Yeah,
they're fine.
yeah, they'll be fine. Honestly, I think it's just kind of something interesting. And honestly, I think for them, in terms of practicing, it'll be better for them to be at LMU as opposed to Woodland Hills. I think Woodland Hills, I mean, I saw they're still, OTAs are taking place in Thousand Oaks. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and it hasn't been that hot out here in LA for some reason. It's kind of like June gloom in May. So they'll be fine. And it's they're closer to the Chargers out there too, which I thought was kind of weird because it's El Segundo and then Marina Del Rey, which is where LMU is at. So I mean they're close by, and it's just kind of interesting that and also pretty cool to see that we're gonna have 5 teams in Southern California doing their training camp. So I'm sure you as a someone who covers the league is really excited about that.
Yeah, I'll probably like pick a week to spend time. Like it's good about spending like sometimes in training camp you kind of you go for a day and then you leave and you don't really get a lot of connections. But if I get to pick a week with this team, a week with that team, man, that could be pretty good.
Sounds good. So one of the things that Eric talked about was Kyron Williams, or was it you? I think, but he won't be participating in
Yeah.
OTAs due to a foot issue. He will be returning for training camp. So I already saw people, talking about fantasy football. They're already saying go and pick up Blake Corum because I mean, and then you've been a big advocate here, Gilbert. You've said, hey, I mean, Kyron Williams is nice, but he just can't stay healthy, and I think that's going to be a theme throughout his career, Gilbert.
I wonder if they already knew about the injury, the Rams, and that's why they kind of like what, let's take Blake Corum right here, and they also know his injury history. It's like he's not the thing about his strengths, he plays between the tackles. He plays physical. He kind of resembles more of a workhorse back, but he's a small body player. Like he's a small dude who plays bigger than he is. He's a great pass protector too. But when you're that physical and you don't have the size, that's a lot of wear and tear on the body, and that's what worries me about Kyron Williams. And I remember his rookie year, like how much they raved about him, and Sean McVay admitted, like, hey, we had big plans for Kyrie in his rookie year, and then he got hurt on the opening kickoff, and he kind of deterred everything. They had to go through this forced marriage with Cam Akers, this and that, but and then last year they really struggled without him. So I think they protected themselves with the Blake Corum pick here. It's kind of like what, here we go again with him. Hopefully he's healthy because I kept saying last year he's the one who makes his Rams offense go. Yeah, Puka's great and all, and Stafford is too, but I think this new kind of scheme that McVay rolled out last year went around Kyron Williams.
Yeah, and I mean it just sucks. I mean it just goes to your point. I mean that's why and I understand why people make fun of Sean McVay, who and less need for drafting running backs every year. But you just don't know, like, and I've seen it with the schemes, whether it's the Shanahan scheme, the McVay. Their running backs usually end up getting hurt because of it, as you said, because they run them between the tackles. So that's the reason why they usually end up drafting running backs every year, and I don't blame them. That's a good way to go, and it's cheap, especially if you're getting them in the third or fourth round. I mean, it sucks for the value of the running backs, but if you're a smart organization, you're gonna go, and that's the way to go. All right, Gilbert. Moving on here. Matthew Stafford has participated in OTAs. When McVay was asked if he was confident Stafford would be at training camp, he said, "quote I'm confident that he's been out there leading the way." Stafford is scheduled to earn 31 million this season, Gilbert. He has 2 additional years left on the extension he signed in 2022, but salaries of 27 million and 26 million are not guaranteed the next 2 years. So, and then I think he's got like a 5 million roster bonus next season, and that's it, Gilbert. Do you expect they'll get a contract done before training camp starts?
I think so, and him showing up to OTAs says a lot about that. Like it's a strong sign where he's showing up to OTAs. It's not mandatory, and he's still showing up, even though he knows he doesn't have that much guaranteed money on his contract. And then it goes back to what Gary Klein said when he told us here in House of Horns. He's not too worried about it. He expects the Rams and Stafford to figure it out. Like I think maybe this was last year, and he was like going into last year, and he was doing that. It's like you were still waiting to see can he recover from all the injuries. Like, is he still going to be that guy? And the way he played last year, I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He won the Super Bowl already, so it's not like here where you're kind of like, you know, Derek Carr or Dak Prescott, and you don't want to like I don't want to pay this guy because he hasn't done much. He hasn't really proven
Yeah.
himself, or it's like he hasn't played like a top 10 quarterback consistently. Like it's not that situation. The issue here is that he's a little older, but I don't think maybe the like who knows what really was going on behind the scenes. Maybe the Rams, like remember the rumors about Stafford being possibly traded, this and that, and they
Yeah.
probably were thinking, you know what, let's get out of this contract after a year or two. I don't think that's the same thinking anymore because of the way he balled out last year. So I think they're gonna get it done. And it's not like he's like a 40-year-old. Yeah, he's a little older at 35, but when you have a good quarterback like that, a proven one that's won a Super Bowl, you don't hesitate to take care of them. The tricky part, Victor, is like he is older. So how do you treat all these contracts for quarterbacks going up? How do you treat that for an older player? I think he's one of those unique ones because I guess maybe Dak Prescott could be one. He's not as old as Dak is not as old as Stafford, but that would be his third contract, right? So when you're
Right.
on the third contract or whatever it is for Stafford, you treat that differently than a guy who hasn't gotten paid. With the guy on the second contract, you pay a crap load for that, like the Jordan Loves and the Tua Tagovailoa, the Trevor Lawrence, and maybe a blueprint could be Jared Goff. That was his third contract. He got the second one was with with the Rams. The thing with Jared Goff, he's younger though. So how do you treat that? These are going to be interesting uh, contract points here. And I'm trying. Maybe I might have terrible memory, but I'm trying to remember the last time where maybe Aaron Rodgers could be a good example. It was a lot of 2-3 year deals with a lot of money. But
Up
again,
front.
yeah, up front. So I don't know. And then a big signing bonus where the player could opt in or opt out. Things like that. Right? They get a little complicated for players that age who are still playing pretty well.
Yeah, the thing I was thinking about as you were talking there, Gilbert, was one of the things with Stafford is in terms of looking at a new contract for him. I think you're right. I think you do like a 2-year deal for him, and then the other thing I thought about, Gilbert, was um, where do you see him being part of the window with the young core that they have? Is it are they gonna move? Are they going to be in step with the new crew that they have coming in with the Puka Nakuas, the Kyron Williams? It's Cup and Stafford. So that's the other thing to kind of keep in mind here. That's why I think it makes sense to kind of extend him for another 2 years, where you leave an option for that second year, because he's getting paid for this year. So as you talked about, I think the best way to go about it is to give him some upfront money to kind of take care of him for the next 2 years. But it'll be interesting. I just don't know. and we talked about it too. They asked him to take a pay cut, Gilbert, and he was like, "No, I'm not doing that." And so that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. Now he has the leverage. I don't
Hmm.
blame him for asking, whatever he asked for, whether it's a 3-year deal with upfront money, he deserves to ask for it because he has the leverage right now. They didn't go. They went and they signed Jimmy Garoppolo, who has he's being suspended for the first 2 games, and then they've never really, we saw. We'll get into it next week if we have a show, but Stetson Bennett is back. Are you confident that he could be a backup quarterback the first 2 games of the season? We'll get into those kind of things, but that's just a lot of question marks when it comes to the Rams, and I don't think they want to go there. You're better off just taking care of it, and then just buying the bullet at this point, Gilbert.
Yeah, and the more I think about it, well, Kirk Cousins, not as old as Stafford, but he's still got $100 million guaranteed, and he's not as proven as Matthew
Yep.
Stafford. So I think he's gonna get paid in that $50 million per year
Yep.
range, but it could be maybe a 3 year contract with an out after 2 years. But to answer your question, I think he's gonna be part of this core group, and it's also gonna be a little easier to pay him because you won't have Aaron Donald on the books. I don't know about Cooper Cup's future, and maybe you find a way. I haven't really studied the contract,
Yeah, the
but
next the next year is going to be tough. I mean, that's why they're trying not to move any more money from him, because next year is the year where you can kind of get out of it with about an $18 million cap hit. This is the year where you're just going to eat it now.
so you just take that contract, and then if it doesn't go with Cup, or maybe you make him take a pay cut or whatever, then you still, because without Cup and Donald being on the books with those massive contracts, you could easily pay your quarterback and the rest of the crew. They're all young. Like Puka won't be due for a while.
Yep.
Kyron, Kobe Turner. So that's the luxury. So I think when these young guys, these core guys, are due for their massive extensions, that's when you kind of think about the end of Stafford. But with the Rams building such a strong roster, like they're not still on the level, of what the 49ers or the Chiefs have done. But I think, building the front, the next couple of drafts, you're always going to see the Rams connected. And it already happened this year, connected to drafting a quarterback for the future, the Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers kind of deal. So even if Stafford gets paid, I would not be shocked if they try to kind of think about like a succession plan.
Yeah, and they have to because you don't know how many more years Stafford. I mean, he played great last season, and as we talked about 2 years ago, everybody, like I said, the Rams asked him for to take a pay cut, and now here we are where he's asking for an extension. And then just going through these real quick, Gilbert. Ernest Jones wasn't in attendance for OTAs because of an excused absence. And then the other one was newly signed guard Jonah Jackson is not participating in 11 on 11 situations because of some quote some things after the season that made him quote not quite ready for full participation according to McVay. But I
Mm.
wouldn't put too much stock into it. I mean, training camp is where you kind of are waiting for. That's the one where you start being concerned about guys like Kyron Williams not being there and even Jonah Jackson. But yeah, that's pretty much what we've gotten from OTA so far. Anything that has stood out for you?
Not really. Obviously, the injury stuff you got to monitor, but like you mentioned, you don't really worry about it into training camp. And there, I know a mandatory mini camp, which will be middle of June. It picks up a little bit, a little more intense workouts, things like that. So obviously, you want to be there for that, but it's only like a couple days. That's why they call it mini camp, right? So I don't like this time of year because people try to make things a big deal that shouldn't be a big deal. But I think once we get to June and mandatory mini camps, I'll feel more like, okay, maybe there could be some bigger things here.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let me just go through these comments that came in after we started news and notes, and then we'll close it up here. DJ Fono says, Ross dress for less. I'll
Yeah.
save myself $150.
Yes,
So
sir.
there you go. DJ Fono is asking, are you guys going to opening day, which is against the 49ers? I won't be going because I usually watch the game from my house, and then we kind of do the post game show. But you've said, Gilbert, that you're not going to be doing Sunday games anymore, but because this might be a big game, you might be there. I don't know what your situation is going to be by then. Week
Yeah.
3.
Probably not. I'm gonna try to stay away from Sunday games. Maybe the only time I'll go to Sunday games is the playoffs. But maybe I could, circle that Thursday night game against the Vikings. There's a couple other ones at home too on prime time that I'll definitely try to be at, and maybe you could maybe do something with listeners of House of Horns before the game and kind of set that up before a primetime game.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'll be a cool thing. Willie Bowen wants to know what's the status of Big Rick Tyler Higbee, and honestly, last we heard Gilbert was that he they don't expect him to be back till either mid season or even later in the season. So
Mm.
I just don't see him being much of an impact this season. If he does, it'll be towards the end of the season.
Yeah, that's why they loaded up on some tight ends. They got Kobe Parkinson. You still got was it Dennis Allen? Some of the people I'm blanking on, but
Davis
they've
Allen.
they've been protected with that.
Yeah, and lastly, Mike Barmentos is Kyron Williams already hurt already. So, yeah, that's the story. But I mean,
Yeah.
you rather he be hurt now than during the regular season. But Gilbert, that was thanks again for getting us Eric Williams. That was a great. He dropped a bunch of nuggets on us there. If you wanted to know about the defense, now you have a little bit more. If you're a Rams fan, you have a little bit more knowledge. As I said, go and read his article, which is called what is it called? The Rams can replace Aaron Donald, but Chris Shula, grandson of Don, has a plan on FoxSports.com. He has a lot of more stuff that he goes in depth in there. So if you're interested and find out more about what you can expect from the Rams defense, go and check out his articles. But it was an awesome get by you, Gilbert. Thanks again for setting that up.
Yeah, no problem. And like I mentioned, a lot of people have been asking about what a Chris Shula defense could look like, and we got the expert on it, Eric Williams, and he was gracious with his time. He broke it down, some insightful responses, some honest responses. So definitely check it out if you missed the first half of the show.
Yeah, and I'll cut up the video and reload it up, upload it, so that way people can enjoy it just like we did with the who was it that we had on? I'm like blanking
Gary
on
Klein, Gary Klein.
Clary Klein. There we go. Well, I'll do the same as well with that one. So, yeah, it's great stuff, Gilbert. We got a lot of stuff done. As we said, this is our ninth episode of the off season. It's been great. With all the content that we've been getting, and then we have one last comment here. One last comment, and it's from Delbert Puros Cuernos. So, with that, Gilbert, go ahead and close us out. Another good episode with a lot of content, and hey, thanks. Shout out to everybody who keeps, everybody who joined us today, Gilbert, Delbert, Michael, Willie, DJ Fono, Jorge, who's a Chargers fan. It's awesome to see people jumping in who are fans of other teams. Willie Bowen, Ramsaholic, so, and even Fernando, I told them that I had a little I might do a little something with the introduction. So that was awesome to see him on here as well. But Gilbert, go
Yeah.
ahead and since you're a good friend and colleague, go ahead and close us
Yeah,
out here.
yeah. Another good episode here of House of Horns. I am a good friend and a good colleague, and hopefully, maybe next week. Or I got to talk to you, Victor, when we'll have
Yes.
another show. Maybe next week or the week after, we'll announce the new winner for the Puka Nakua jersey because Ricky Drummond never appeared. I was gonna make a terrible joke. He was a one-time person for
Yes.
the
A
show.
one timer.
Yeah, I was gonna say something else, but yeah, we're trying to give you a few more episodes through mandatory mini camp, and then after that, we'll probably take some time off for the dead period. We have a few vacations lined up here, but you want to get you some more content through OTAs and through mini camp, and hopefully announce a winner for Puku Nakua jersey. But it's time to go. We appreciate everybody jumping on. Check out the replay version of this episode with Eric Williams, and thank you to Eric for jumping on again. But it's time to go. On that note, ya nos vamos, pues.